Hello, adventurers. My name is Maximus, and I am here with Moobs Like Jagger from the GG and crew. And welcome to tonight's episode of Tome of Knowledge. And in classic me fashion, right when I hit to change the scene over, something like fell off of my wall, like right out of the corner of my eye. So I'm all like, "What am I supposed to say now? What fell over?" But yeah, it is. It's. I think my office is upset because I need to tidy it up. Everything in this region looks great for stream, but over here doesn't. So I need to do a little.
Full cleanness.
Yeah, yeah, fun times.
Okay, fantastic. Yeah. So, yeah, you've been on vacation for a while. How was your trip?
It was fantastic to not have to think about any responsibilities whatsoever for like a week. The only negative is I got sunburned to hell like day 2 or day 3. Unfortunately. And what's even worse is I put sunscreen on 3 times that day. But I think I put it on, it didn't bake in, and I went to the pool or like to the ocean, and it just kind of just washed it all off. So
From 1 to 9, how many layers of hell were you burnt?
ooh. Um I'd probably say a 5.
Okay.
Like it was hot to the touch, like it hurt to move around, but if on a scale of 1 to 9, a 9's like I'm going to like the hospital. Like it was bad, but not like awful. Um I was lucky I had some of those like I don't know what to call them, like really lightweight beach mesh shirts, and I brought a long sleeve one, so I just wore that the next couple of days so I wouldn't have the sun on me.
Like linens, or are we talking like goth, fishnet stockings?
No,
I would love to
no,
see
no. Yeah, I do not want a fishnet pattern on my chest. No, it's like kind of like workout shirts, like the really breathable fabric
Oh,
type
okay. All right.
stuff.
All right. Yeah. Murkras, you should have said you should have been in full plate. You would have been fine.
Yeah, I might have had heat exhaustion, but I would have been not sunburned. That's for sure.
Well, before we get into talking about how much prep is too much prep for DMs, let's say hello to our live viewers. We got Chinner, we got Village, we got Mercat, we got Zeus, Majestic Wolf. What's going on, everybody?
Hello, everybody. Hope you're having a fantastic Monday.
Shout out to our beautiful lurkers.
And shout out to those of you that listen to us on the podcast or are members of our Patreon. We have some awesome stuff, and you should go look at it. And you should be part of Patreon. In
And
the
our
link,
YouTube friends.
yes, and our YouTube friends. And if you haven't yet, please go subscribe to us on YouTube. It's just Caches and Cantrips, and it would really help us out. We do all of our
We're
live
close. How
streams.
close are we? We're almost we are 78
78.
away
Mm-hmm.
from the big 1000.
Yep. 1000 is a major milestone that we need on our conquest of YouTube. So,
All right, we must dominate.
yeah, that's a healthy attitude to have, right? We should dominate an entire
We
platform.
dominate.
Oh man. Anyway, there are a couple of important dates left on the calendar. First of which is this Friday, March 31st, 6 p.m. Pacific time, is we have Ron's Dreamy One Shot. And it will feature all of the players, and including me, in this one shot where I'm going to be playing Brannis, who's everyone's favorite character from Campaign 1. And it's going to be a wild time where our buddy Moobs is going to be the DM.
Yep. First time DMing live. I'm a little nervous.
It'll be fine.
Yeah, it should be great. It'll be fine. Everything will work, and we're all gonna have a great time.
The worst thing that can happen is you kill the entire party.
That's true. And I guess the campaign 1 is over, so it wouldn't matter, right?
Sure, yeah. It doesn't matter. It's fine.
Oh no, I guess it does matter because it's still the same world.
retroactive continuity. We're
Yeah.
creating different universes now.
It's a variant world. Okay, so in case they die, is not it's parallel universe. It's not the actual real universe.
Oh no, it's canon, 100%. You heard it here first. Aside
Dang
from
it.
March 31st, April 7th is going to be Out of Combat Live, so where we can talk about what happened during Campaign 1. So if you have any questions for us, launch them in the Discord. You can tweet them at us. You can put them in the comments on
Yes.
YouTube, any way that you know that we will see them. So if you're unfamiliar with the Discord, it's discord.gg/casters and cantrips. And
You know what? We should make a channel or a forum for people's questions for Out of Combat Live into the Discord. And if you're not in Discord, just go to castersandcantrips.com and let us know on Twitter and all that stuff, socials.
mhm. Yeah, Majestic Wolf, you're on episode 1. I would like to say, if you're on episode 1, the quality of production gets much better. It was our first episode. There were technical problems, but it was still a great episode. That's all I'm gonna say. We got the map shit locked down later on, so I promise.
I still want to do a cast commentary, and we all
Oh,
watched episode 1 together.
oh my god.
And to comment on things that are happening. That's 2 years ago. That's a long time.
Yeah, I'm writing a note on that too. I mean, wow, Village, it was a rough start. Appreciate the support. No, that was actually the first time that I had streamed D&D as a DM live. So it's all good. And then now look at us. Look at us.
We
But
are famous D&D streamers now.
if only. We didn't get invited to the summit. We're not famous. I'm sorry. Just kidding.
Well, good, because when we do get famous, we're gonna decline when they invite us.
Don't put words in my mouth because I don't know if I could do
Okay,
that.
sorry. We'll be there. Sorry. We'll be there. I'm just kidding. You're
It's like,
listening.
I don't know if I could do
Whoever's in charge of the invitation committee, will be there.
Oh man. So March 31st, Ron's gonna be one shot. April 7th, Out of Combat Live. April 21st, Campaign 2. April 21st, April 21st, April 21st, Campaign 2 is happening, and it is like less than a month away now. What am I doing?
Oh
Everything's
man.
fine.
My character board is done. My
Mm-hmm.
backstory's done. My character sheet's done. I'm ready.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
Oh,
and
sorry, Chinner.
and excitedly enough, at Campaign 2, we have a new cast member joining us. So if you didn't see our announcement, Nina Nikolic is going to be joining us for Campaign 2. So very excited about that. And thank you for the resubscription, Buddha. Hope you're doing well, bud.
Buddha?
But yeah, very exciting. We're going to have 5 players instead of 4. So good times.
The hierarchy of power has changed.
What do you mean by that?
I don't know. What I meant to say, I just wanted to say that. But what I meant to say is the dynamics are different now because there's an extra player, but it's still gonna be great. It's still gonna be us. Nina's freaking fantastic. She's awesome.
She's a pro, literally.
Yep.
You may
Not
know
gonna
her
be
as Kid Kerrigan through her Twitch
not
journey.
gonna be intimidated voice acting with a professional voice actor at all. Nope.
It's going to be great. It's going to be great. See, all you have to do is get hired on one time, do voice acting, and then you're a professional.
It's like credited or uncredited because I'm uncredited, not credited.
Did they
I'm
pay
not
you to
new.
do it?
No.
Okay. That's the benchmark for being a professional, I think.
True. Okay. I'll work on that next time. Anyways, let's
Yeah.
get into it. Tome of knowledge. Been rambling
Yay.
for 20 minutes now. So yeah, can a DM prep too much? And I'll mostly defer to you, Max, since you're
Mhm.
our resident DM and definitely have more experience than I do for sure. But yes.
my short answer to that, which we'll expand upon and discuss and sort of peel back the layers. My short answer is, oh my god, yes, you can absolutely over prepare, especially as a new DM. For me, I was a serial over preparer, like awful. I spent hours and hours and hours on every single episode of Caches and Cantrips, an obscene amount of time, of which most of which the audience didn't even see. So, absolutely. How do you over prepare cereal? You pour too much milk in it.
Unless it's Fruity Pebbles or Cookie Crisp, and then you just have delicious milk afterwards.
Well, I meant like way overflow it.
Oh, okay. All right. Well, so how
So,
much of a balance do you think is prepping and kind of freestyling it?
so in the beginning, uh, in the beginning of Caches and Cantrips, I leaned more on the side of preparation than winging it because I wanted those things to fall back on. The problems that I didn't know that I had is that I would focus on things that weren't important to the game, if that makes sense. I would focus on small, minuscule things that really had no wide swathing effect on just the game in general. I wanted like a safety blanket of if the players did anything that I'd be ready for it.
Do you have any
Which
examples? Like what was not important, but you spent too much time preparing for?
absolutely, you you all should see my notes on Aramore. Good God. I have literally every single building in that city mapped out with every single resident, with every single shop owner, with every single good they carried in each of their shops. It was obscene.
That's like that is crazy level because that's you're basically building or prepping for a module for players to use your
Yeah,
world. If you're going in that much detail of every good inside the shop, their names and what their inventory was, that's freaking crazy.
yeah, yeah. I had just the different like relationships laid out of who was who and who is who, like whose spouse was who, and like what they did, how they worked, what their profession was. It was a lot. I spent a lot of time on that.
So do you have like an exact number to the head count of the population
Oh,
of Airmore?
jeez. I mean, I could dive into my OneNote.
Oh, you don't need to dive into it, but you're
I can't give you a population number off the top of my head, but it was just a lot of prep. I'm looking through here. It's just a list of like NPCs with like facts and stuff about them. It's at least 50.
I'm gonna echo what Chiba said. How many pages of backstory did Bigwin have, and how many adventures did you have in the book in case we convince him to talk about his past?
How many pages of backstory did Bigwin have? The only right answer is not enough. This is never enough. How many adventures did we have in the bag? I sort of, speaking about him and specifically, I don't want to go too off the rails, but I kind of had an idea of Bigwin just being retired, and it would take a lot of convincing to pull him out of that retirement. It's dangerous. I mean, adventuring is dangerous business. Um, yeah, I mean, I had all sorts of things. Like I'm looking through this list, um, about the curios and antiquities shop, um, where there was the folded paper frog, and when you unfolded the paper, it would send you an uplifting message. I have 200 messages that were written out of uplifting messages that were possible from that
That
piece of
you
paper.
wrote?
Some of which I wrote, some of which I found lists of like compliments and stuff. So not everything that I wrote, but like just a long ass list of things. Um,
I don't think there's a would there's no like a D100, but for 200, would you roll double D100s to
I don't
get every
know.
message?
I would cross something off every time it was used until
Oh,
they
so
were
once it gets
used.
used up, that line is gone. So you'll never receive that compliment again.
Yeah, until they were used and it rolled back around. Do not use this as an example of what to do. I'm telling you what not to do. Trust me. telling you what not to do. I'm looking through here and I just have just all like the Wooded Duck Tavern's menu for breakfast, lunch, dinner, snacks, all of the drinks they had on tap. Like, you don't need that shit. You don't need all that. Trust me.
Did you learn quickly not to do that for the other towns we went to, or you did that for every town?
No, I did not do that for every single town. I learned by necessity. Um, in that I could not physically pour enough hours into the campaign to be able to do that, right? And one thing that I tried to do was focus more on what was important to the game at hand. What's important for the next session, right? What are the things that might happen? What are the people they might talk to? Instead of fleshing out everything all at once, because more often than not, you're going to over prepare. And there are going to be things that they don't even see or hear about, or like minuscule things that aren't a plot hook that just never come up.
Um, so was there so what do you so you like obviously like maybe the first few sessions you're going to do a
Hmm.
ridiculous amount of prepping because you're not really going to sure what your players are going to do
Hmm.
in the beginning of the campaign. Uh, so after all that prepping and players kind of do what players do and
Hmm.
do their own thing with if they're kind of oblivious to the guidance that you provide,
Yeah.
you what would you do if the players decide to go off rail from what you prep? Would you try to get them back on track, or would you just kinda rip up your notes and just go with it?
I think it depends on the situation. So the way that I've sort of settled into my style is I have sort of just story hooks that they can investigate, um, based on what they hear, what they see, right? Whatever quests they're given from different NPCs, and you all had choices of who you could talk to, what you could do, where you could go, those type of things. Um, but I think that there is, and this is might be a session zero discussion or like a first session like get together of like, hey, we're all here to play D&D. We're all playing a game. We're going on an adventure, and there's a story to be told here. So, some people throw around the word railroaded way too often to mean that you have a plan for your for your story. It's not the same thing. But I think that um, there's two scenarios in my mind. First scenario is you go in an unintended direction from a thread that I left out there. Maybe I wasn't prepared enough for it to happen immediately. I would go with it. I think that one of my strong suits as a DM is being able to improvise on the spot, and I think just from the fact of streaming for so long, it's all I did essentially. So it kind of helped, flex or build up those improv muscles. But the flip side of that coin is, let's say you're going on an adventure and the story is that you're saving the town from an evil wizard, and if the party goes, we don't want to do that, we want to sail across the world and do this, that's a totally different story. Right? There has to be some like buy-in with the party of like, what story are we trying to tell here? So if it's related to the world and the area and the story, absolutely, I wouldn't rip out my notes, I'd save them for later, and then let you go off on this tangent that you want to do. But if it's totally out of left field, that might be a situation where I'd be like, all right, hey, come on, y'all. Like, we got this thing going on. Like, is this really what you want to do?
What if they said yes? We wanted not kill
Yeah.
the evil wizard and do this thing.
Yeah. I would feel that in that case, I would have failed as a DM. Because hopefully those things sort of come up in the world that you're in like session zero. That's why I think they're so important. Um, and I'd be like, okay, in my mind as a DM, I was like, I failed in this preparation. I would need more time, obviously, if they were completely leaving the continent that I, intended for them to be on. For me, what I would do is like, okay, you're telling me you don't want to play a game where you save towns from evil wizard. You're telling me you want to play a game where you hop on a boat and sail across the world. Cool. That's a totally different campaign. Give me some time and I'll write it up. That's probably what I would do in that case. But that's
Uh,
kind of a really out there like what if example too.
let's see. Well, Village asks a good question. How many encounters did you prepare? that you never used in the essence of over prepping?
Um, I would say that I knew pretty well when the party was going to be encountered, right? I knew that pretty well because that's one thing that the DM you can control very easily. So the only times that I had like encounters that weren't used, um, this is something that I do too, a little behind the scenes is let's say there's a battle with waves of enemies. I tend to prepare more waves and I kind of tune them based on how I think the battle's going. If because it's hard for me to in those scenarios to gauge how hard combat is when you're facing like five or six waves of things. So I have some like reserves in the back of like is this strong enough or is it not? And those are some things that I would use or wouldn't use depending on the situation. But that's more along the lines to I use it to make sure that the combat is fulfilling um, for the players because I don't want to be the DM where I under prepare the combat for a really serious like encounter and you all walk all over it. Like that doesn't feel very good in a pivotal like story moment, right? So I tend to have contingencies in there that are built in, but that's really the only time that that happened where I'll like, oh, don't need these guys, kind of thing.
Yeah, I think when I prep for things, I generally have the story arc where I want the players to go to or how I want it to be told, but
Hmm.
most of in the middle, I kinda improv it. So it's probably and that just became very stressful for me. So, I don't think that's the the style I would keep choosing moving forward because I'm
Hmm.
still relatively a newbie to DMing. Um, but I still enjoy kind of the random encounter, battles. It's not always gonna be a battle, it could be interacting with a character. You're not always gonna be fighting. Um, but I kinda maybe because I love playing Japanese RPGs, so I enjoy getting that random encounter. But
Hmm.
how would you balance that with, like, what the combats you have planned versus the combats that just randomly pop up because of RNG?
Yeah, so all of those things that I had you all roll like random d8s and d10s when you're in the wilderness, that was just a list of things that could possibly happen to you all based on what you rolled. And I think that some of those combats aren't as involved in preparation wise as like pivotal story moments, so they're easy to like drop in. You know, like hey, I rolled a 7 on the d8. Oh, you encounter 3 yetis. I can drop in 3 yetis and put you on a field, and then I and call it good and have you fight 3 yetis. That's not a big deal. Um, I like that aspect because in certain areas I want traveling to feel dangerous. And you notice sort of in the campaign where if you're in the city on the roads, you typically could travel unimpeded most of the time, but when you got to the wilderness, that's where things changed. So I have some of those ready that I keep a list of, and then when you're in a certain area, I'll have you roll and do those things.
How do you so not every journey requires, like, random encounters, but what do you feel like is a good balance? Like, well, if it's a one-day challenge, or do you have them roll every other day of travel, or do you have, like, a system in place? If it's X amount of days, that means X amount of potential random encounters.
The way that I handle it is it depends on the environment that they're in and how dangerous I want it to feel, right? Um, Whereas when you were all in like the Tyrian region, I would have you roll every single day on stuff because I wanted it to feel wild. I wanted it to feel like uncivilized. Um, that's kind of how I handled that. But you can make up your own system. You could easily do that in a city too. Of X amount of hours passed, you have them roll for something to happen in the city. That's just sort of how I wanted to incorporate the sort of random encounters.
Right on. Just do like every other DM has players ignore a highly prepared area, grit your teeth, and then go to bed crying in your pillow.
No, I mean that's a funny comment, but what I did is at a point I just decided in my brain I'm creating the sandbox, I'm putting the toys in there. The players decide what toys to play with, right? And that's how I want to run my campaign typically. There's nothing wrong with running a campaign. For example, I played in a Lord of the Rings style game where it's like, hey, you know what the plan is, and this is what you got to do. Um, but there's nothing wrong with doing that either. It's just more of a discussion with your players. But I never felt sad that they didn't do something. Because what that says to me is if I dropped the hints and they didn't pick up what I was putting down, it means they weren't interested in it, or it means I didn't explain it enough to see if they were interested in it. None of that really bothers me.
And you could always use that content later, you
Oh
know?
yeah, absolutely, 100%, hundred
Yeah,
percent.
I think that's probably the maybe the pros of players not engaging in content, because then you can just reinsert it anywhere, anytime, and just maybe rewrite it a little, and if they don't go back to the area and they're in a different area.
Yeah, 100%. And it's really easy to look at this sort of thing that you had planned, and if it no longer fits, you can reskin it, you can rework it, you can take the ideas that you like out of it and just morph it into something different for the new area that they're in. And there's nothing wrong with that at all.
Um, see, how I had it in my mind, and I lost okay, it's back. It was just like that, boom. For, like, tips for new DMs who are starting out,
Mhm.
uh, and would you suggest that maybe they would follow modules where things are kinda put it down in paper? Or and if they wanted to, can just, like, homebrew their own little town or world.
100%. If you are new to DMing, use a module. 100%. There's plenty of official D&D ones, there's plenty of unofficial that you can find for very cheap on like DM's Guild or elsewhere. um because there's a lot of like pillars of like the DM like position, right? A lot of it is like social encounters, like role playing, combat, um exploration, like world building, deciding what quests they want to do, the storytelling aspect to it. And coming in as a new DM, being able to have some of those pillars already taken care of for you makes it a lot easier to sort of dip your toe into it. Don't do what I did and say I'm gonna DM and then make the shit up as I go, right? And do everything from scratch. Don't do that. This is not a
I
success
feel like
story that I want you to follow.
most people who start out doing that because they wanna make their own world and they wanna tell
Yeah,
their own story. I wish someone told me to just do a module, just, to get the chops going, because, I was like, "I'm gonna create a whole town, and then I'm gonna create all these shops, and then that this is the residential district, this is the market, this is where the nobility live," and I'm like, "Why am I doing this?"
yeah.
And no, I don't know if any of it's right and stuff, but, yeah, I wish someone told me that early on, just to, like, practice and have that all there and just focus on storytelling rather than trying to create a town and from scratch.
Yeah, and they're very different like disciplines too in each of those pillars that we were talking about. But I mean, it's very fulfilling to make your own world and have people play in it. Don't get me wrong there, it's very fulfilling. I don't think that's the best option for a brand new DM. Uh I think that I pulled it off because I've been a player for so long. Um and just sort of knew a lot of the material just offhand for whatever reason. I have nothing better to do but read D&D books apparently. But
Hey, that's why
um,
we're here.
yeah, I mean, hey, that's why we're here. But yeah, use a module. This was your first time. Get a feel for it. See if you even like it.
Yeah, it's always much easier being a player than being a DM, because the DM controls basically every aspect of the game and the world and how the players engage with with the story and the NPCs that you create. It's just there's a ridiculous amount of work. So big props to you, Max, and all the other DMs, Zeus. Uh, Jesse, man, incredible.
I will say too, and we talked about not spending a whole lot of time about like micro, like building out towns and stuff like that. One thing that I've sort of shifted to, and especially with like prepping for campaign two, is it's okay to have. I mean, you want to do some world building. You want to have your macroscopic 30,000 foot view of like what the world is, and sort of what I've done is okay. What is this world? What are its major features? Who are the powers at play here? What do they want? Who are some of the major players in those factions? And I mean player as in not player character, as in like movers and shakers, right? Um, and filling in little details like what deities do they worship, if any, as that kind of may drive some of their decisions. That's okay, and I think that's a very important step in world building for starting a campaign. You just don't want to go into the trap of, okay, I have 10 major cities in my world, I need to fill out all 10 of them immediately. You don't need to do that.
No, yeah, that's like writing a dissertation.
Yeah, get a general idea of who they are, who the major players are, and what they want. But you don't have to go street by street of every single city and try and fill it out, especially when your game's just starting.
Zeus's comment: the risk with modules is a lot of the module writers want to stand out from the rest, so they might overcomplicate or overtune their initial encounters, leading to possible TPKs. Yeah, I that could definitely happen. Um, but I
What I
think
would
once
Go ahead.
I think that once you get used to things, it's okay to still use modules because it's already everything's like laid out for you. You can absolutely use the same world, but change or just make your own story. You don't have to use the quests that I have written in and modify those type of things to adjust to yours and your group's play style.
I will say too, and I think Zeus, when you're pointing to is a new DM just grabbing a module, I would recommend of spending some time figuring out what module you want to run, right? And luckily now we have the World Wide Web with lots of like forums and Reddit. And there's generally like you can say, hey, what are the best modules to run for a new DM to kind of steer you in the right direction? And you can find those lists because I have to. I think I'd done the same thing and gave Bun a list of stuff she wanted to run for her friends. It's like, hey, I want to run something. I want a module. What should I do? And finding those resources is not hard. So
Definitely not Strahd if you're new.
yeah, Lost Mines is infamous for the first encounter being a TPK machine. Do your research, figure out what should I run first. Don't blindly grab a module without knowing what you're getting into. Let the internet do the work for you. Um,
I think Rise of Tiamat is also kind of unforgiving. There's just like so many back to back combats and just like the beginning of the module without spoilers, like it was just really, really tough of like trying to traverse through the village and get where you need to do and defend the people. It felt
mhm.
it felt grueling.
Village says Max has made custom magic items. How did you think about how it balances with other magic items at that level? It's a great question. I am a DM that is not comfortable enough putting on like the game designer hat, and that I'm very, very cautious of not trying to change too much to make things overpowered or underpowered, or out of balance. Typically, what I do for some of those magic items is I will look at things that particularly other like classes or subclasses can get at that certain level, or other magic items that have a particular property, and I'll find things that make sense and tweak them a little bit and then put them on like the magic item. Is what I typically do. Now I will say that the characters in campaign one, I mean, they were pretty overpowered. They were hitting above their weight class for sure because they had some extra feats and some magic items and stuff too. I feel like, but that's okay. I think it fit the setting well. And going into that, knowing that they are, you can sort of accommodate for that. But I don't go. I don't go all wild with a blank piece of paper and say I'm gonna make a magic item now. That's not something that I'm comfortable doing at all, to be honest. And to
Just
be
let me
honest,
know.
what's that?
I was gonna say, just let me know because I'm good with that stuff. So
Yeah, and I
if
will
you
say
need help,
too. Uh-huh. Go
yeah,
ahead.
if you need help making magic items, I'm your guy. I can. Uh, I always go back to 3.5 or 3.0 and reference and stuff, but we went pretty hard on creating things and most likely catering to the play style we want to play, and most of the time it was kinda, well, we wanted to feel like badasses and blow stuff up. But yeah, I could definitely help you in that department on depending on how on what kinda knowing that you're gonna give a player an item, how powerful do you want them to feel? I think that's more
Hmm.
important than what the item is, like,
Yeah,
how awesome does it feel for the player to use this item?
yeah, and I really liked the item like what Falcon had is it leveled up with him. I like those type of items, and there's a little bit of precedence for that, which I think they're very interesting. Um, I had like you, I had something, but now it's gone. What was I had it, and then it left me. My
I
brain's failing
it's
me now.
it's 'cause I interrupted you, I'm
Oh,
sorry.
no, 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 it's okay. Another option or another thing is you're talking about making custom magic items, and I want to rein this back over to like new DMs. 'Cause I think this may be important. Focus on the things that are important to the game. Creating custom magic items as a new DM, you don't need to do it. There are literally hundreds upon hundreds of magic items in the game. You can find something that will work for you. Same for custom monsters. There are hundreds and hundreds of monsters available to you on D&D Beyond or whatever third party compendiums you want to use. Don't get like bogged down trying to make your own custom things starting out because there's plenty of things already out there ready for you.
Yep. Big, big facts. Yeah, the player gives me so much anxiety when village DMs since they can choose to skip content, do unforeseen things, break your world with your magic items, and get very unlucky slash lucky in combat or dangerous encounters. Same. Like this Friday, it's not even it's Monday and I'm losing my mind already. Like
It's okay. You're gonna do great. Skipping content, and it goes back to what I said, is it depends on what kind of game you're running to. It's important to talk to your players and say, if it's a thing like, hey, your goal is to do this and everyone needs to work together to do this, that's a different conversation than, hey, I have a sandbox world, do whatever you want. I think that conversation is very important to have with your players so they know what expectations that you have of them as a DM. Doing unforeseen things, it's always going to happen. There's always something that like you can't think of everything that a player is going to do because players be players, right? You just have to get good at adapting to those situations on your end, and it just takes practice, right? It just takes practice
yeah,
of
it's true.
and it takes a bit of knowledge of the game as well as knowledge of your world. Like how would if player X wants to do this, how what are the consequences of that? Does that work in this situation? Those sort of things. Um and yeah, you can't think of everything, shoots my anxiety levels up drastically. You'll come to a point the more you DM is that you literally cannot think of everything. And if you're trying to think of everything, then you're wasting your time on prepping for things that probably won't happen. It's okay for players to do unexpected things because it's gonna happen and you can't prepare for it. That's okay. There are other skills that you can sort of mature as a DM to help mitigate some of those circumstances. Being comfortable in those situations can go a long way too, and that just goes back to getting your improv hat on sometimes.
Yeah,
Um,
and jumping on that, Max, I was just gonna say, yeah, if you want to help boost your creative juices and like your thinking on your feet and just confidence in general, like take an improv class. Like that's something I want kind of want to do. I haven't taken an improv class before, and it's something I'm kind of interested in.
you're looking at one of the fourth place improv persons in the state in the early 2000s right here, early to mid.
Oh, I didn't know we were in the presence of such a. dignified royalty. Fourth place, my lord.
No, a friend of mine, we used to do competitive improv back in school. Um, and it was you had a topic and you had 30 minutes to come up with something. And I was very angry because we made it to state we could never get out of fourth place. Every single school we went to, fourth place. So I don't give trophies for fourth place, unfortunately.
Well, jokes on them because you have a very popular D&D stream.
Yeah, joke's on you because I'm first place in your hearts. So there.
Oh,
um, let me dissect more of what Village said. Break your world with your magic items. That is where I am weak in, and that's why I say give them magic items that are from the book. There's hundreds and hundreds of them. They tier them by level, and if you follow that guide, it should be okay. And if by the book magic items aren't good enough for your players, fuck them. They can go play another game.
yeah, that's something I struggle with because uh yeah, I have my other group where like power gamers, so I'm used to being showered with magic items, especially in the earlier editions of D&D,
Mhm.
where every single body part had a slot and you can be fully kitted, and then moving over to 5th edition where magic items are much lower, and like you can't they don't even have like a price for like the most magic items like they did back in the day, where you can,
Yeah.
if you had a ridiculous amount of gold, you could buy anything you wanted, uh if it was available, and the DM was wise enough to like, yeah, you can't buy that, that's ridiculous.
Yeah. I like the scarcity of magic items now. I like that you just can't buy anything you want. iMac on the YouTube
Hi,
side, like I
Mac.
said, go to YouTube, subscribe if you haven't. And
Yeah,
if you don't, I won't love you.
you could talk with mac and cheese, he'll still love you, but you could talk with mac and cheese, please.
Moose is like, we're gonna smooth that over real quick.
Papa Max won't love you, but Uncle Moobs will, okay?
I wanted to get to the very last part there of when you think you said village is very unlucky slash lucky in combat or dangerous encounters. Um, that's luck of the dice. The best way that you can prepare that I use for preparing for combat encounters is I will straight up use either D&D Beyond's combat encounter generator for you, or some of the third party ones, like Cobalt Fight Club that went offline but has been since resurrected by other people. Use those. I know CR is not a great way, it's not the best way to judge how difficult a combat is, but it's the only one we have unless you want to come up with your own system. Use that. And if they are lucky and if the combat it goes well for them, awesome. Now you know for next time how difficult you need to gauge um, your combats, how much you need to ratchet up the difficulty. If they're unlucky, I will say that if they're unlucky, if it's a dangerous encounter, part of the DM's job is letting them know that it's a dangerous encounter. And I know I've made offhanded remarks on the stream where it's like you can run, almost taunting, but it is a valid strategy, and I think it's important to convey to your players either in world or just out of character, like, hey, this is a dangerous battle, like just so you know, shit's about to hit the fan, just so they know going into it, because ultimately, like if something happens, if a player character dies or if the party TPKs, um, it happens, right? It hasn't happened to me yet, but it happens.
I feel like when the DM says you could run, and the players almost instantly become defiant. They're like, "No, I am not running, and this is not how this is going down."
Then that becomes their problem, not your problem.
No, that's 100% true. It's the player's fault. The
Shifting the
DM
blame.
the DM gave him an out, and the players were like, "Nah, we're doing this." But also in regards of like how lucky or unlucky players are, if you're good with rolling with the dice, and kind of, you got the DM screen. The players don't know what's going on behind there. Like they don't see your dice rolls unless you're the type of DM that lets players see your dice rolls. You can adjust on how things are going, especially if things are looking grim.
Mhm.
Like
Interesting,
I, I
Mac. Go ahead.
I agree with Max. Like it's not about beating the player. You're here to have a great time and play a game together.
Yep.
It's never fun when the DM's trying to kill the party. I mean,
Mhm.
they are trying to kill the party, but not like maliciously and
No,
like
not trying to kill the party. Yeah, interesting take. Getting captured versus fighting until a party kill. Yeah, that's something that I've had in my back pocket of depending on who you were fighting. And that's why we talked about previously about running encounters and like how different enemies think. If you're fighting, a band of thugs, right, and they take you all out, chances are maybe they have an ulterior motive. Maybe they will capture everybody and try and ransom you off to some lord that you were doing work for. Um, that sort of thing. Absolutely, you could have absolutely ended up in jail back. That's just something that didn't happen, right? Just because the party falls in battle doesn't necessarily mean everyone dies. There's a lot of other more interesting possibilities that can happen depending on the story. If you're fighting five owlbears in the woods, they're probably not going to capture you. I mean,
wait, there's no Alabama jail?
there's no owlbear jail. Sorry, not in my world.
Damn.
Oh
The
yes,
owlbears are fun.
specifically Mac, not any of the characters. Yeah, Mac would go to jail, not the characters.
If anyone was gonna go to jail, it would 100% be Max character Vin.
But yeah, that stuff's always a possibility too. And those are some things those are the cards you can probably play once, right? And if you've overtuned an encounter that has gone very wrong and sideways for the party, those are some there's some cards that you can play, but you can probably only play them once. If every time they lose an encounter they get captured and then it's fine, then combat becomes trivial. And I think that you want to avoid that happening for the players because if the players go in knowing that whatever happens we're going to be okay, it takes a lot of the thrill and suspense out of combat. So you have to be careful with those sort of things, but they are tools in your DM toolbox for sure. 100%.
Go back to speaking of combat encounters and DM prepping
Hmm.
for this cast. How much is too much prep to know what each opponent or NPC or creature or whatever is gonna drop loot, or do you just defer to like the random loot table?
So depending on what drops loot, so for individual bandit, I will look at what weapons and armor they're using, and I'll drop that. If you're looking more specifically at other like types of loot, a really great trick is in the DMG. There's a treasure hoard table, and I think this is something that John and I have talked about quite a bit. Is roll on your treasure hoard table, um, get all the items from the treasure hoard, and then divvy those out through the entire arc. So that way you have a list of things to divvy out. And it creates some really interesting ways of sort of reverse storytelling is, hey, if this very expensive art object dropped from this combat or this person's house, like what is that? Why do they have this? Or like if they have like a sack full of gems, like how did they get these? Where did they come from? That's some stuff that it can help you as well. And then if you roll on that table and it doesn't spark joy, roll again. Who cares? you're the DM. Roll again. Um, make it interesting. Edit it yourself. I've done that too. Specifically, it's like, hey, I like these things. I don't like that. I don't want this to be part of the world. Or hey, this job isn't good enough for the level. I'll switch things around.
Nice.
That's an
I don't know
easy
what to
way
say
to do it.
afterwards. I was just
You're
like,
just like,
nice.
nice loot, nice.
Yeah, it's always fun to get loot, especially when you get uh magic goodies. Um, I even like the flavor magic items. They're just mundane items like a pipe of smoke, and you Gandalf a ship or a dragon or whatever.
Cloak of billowing, that kind of stuff.
Yeah, I think it adds a
Agreed.
flair for your character. It's like good role playing moments too of just
Mhm.
using those silly items.
Yeah, and some of like the common and uncommon magic items, some of the lower level stuff can produce some really interesting moments in the campaign. That's for sure. So don't sleep on them. Everybody doesn't need a +1 sword all the time. There's more interesting things out there.
You do. Let's see. Zeus got some advice here. To advice for encounter prep is to split into 3 waves. Count on the players on fighting 2 of the 3. But if wave 1 God smacks the player, then don't release wave 2 or 3. If the player uh, crushes wave 1 and 2 isn't enough, then release a Kraken. Wave 3.
Yeah, that's more eloquently put than what I was referring to earlier, is having like unused encounters. That's a good way to make sure things are balanced. It's a
So
great idea.
when like you and Zeus are referring to waves, you're probably insinuating like a dungeon crawl. There's different rooms with different amount number of counters. This is what's the
Mhm.
representative waves, not like the gaming term of waves where just waves after waves of monsters just come
You could do
in the
both.
same encounter. That's
Yeah,
also true.
there
Yes.
were there were combats where you all encountered waves of enemies for sure. But no, you could definitely do both. 100%.
Speaking of waves or encounters, how would you? I was not maybe not obviously, but some- as a DM is trying to whittle down players' resources before they get to the big boss, so players don't
Mhm.
save up everything and then unleash hell and just gib your boss. What do you think is the best balance for DMs planning encounters to maybe not whittle them completely drained to fight the boss, making it possibly un unbeatable? What do you, and again, that's also on the player's side of deciding on what to do. Where do you find that balance?
Yeah, and what I typically did in the beginning is I looked at the DMG to figure out how many what should they do, and that's where they come from. Like the DMG says, like 6 to 8 encounters per day is what you usually get. I typically reserve those for like dungeon crawls, but then you need to just strike a balance of maybe some easy encounters, medium encounters, and hard encounters, to sort of whittle them down. And you have to be careful. And I think in other cases, when you were sort of dungeon crawling, I usually had maybe 4 or 5 encounters before the big boss ish. And I would sprinkle in easy, medium, and hard based on like CR and just kind of go from there. Um, the idea in those circumstances is make the combat compelling enough that they don't want to hoard all their resources, and that's tough to do because you don't want to throw everything hard at them until the very end because they'll probably run out of resources way too quick. It's a very interesting balancing act that can be mitigated, based on what Zeus and I were talking about having waves of enemies ready to go depending on how things are going or things that could encounter in certain areas. Thank you, Bordicus, for resubscribing.
Good to know. Good to know. I didn't selfishly pick this topic for a reason for my one shot on Fridays. So
Yeah.
it's
Well, with a one shot, I mean, a lot of the rules go out the window. It's one and done. So, um,
true, but it's still good to
yeah,
balance and you know have this knowledge before going in because yeah, one anything goes in one shots. There's a lot of times like yeah, it's a one shot. I'll allow it. Or and then you don't want to like
yeah,
overrun your players.
yeah. And I'll clarify too. And when I say encounters, that doesn't just mean combat. Um, Especially in the dungeon mindset. And I know so I see you put it in the chat as well, Zeus. Of it could be traps, it could be puzzles, it could be different hazards they have to deal with. It doesn't always have to be a combat encounter because there are many a times the players decided to use resources to mitigate a trap or something along those lines, like to dispel magic on a magical trap, which is great. Hey, they succeeded. They expended their resources to do that, but that also fulfills your goal of trying to have a little bit of attrition before they get to the boss.
So speaking of using resources and stuff, so how do you feel when the players is like we're the boss fights coming up and they know it like we're gonna take a full rest?
Depends upon their surroundings. So there's a couple of things there. You're in a like a quote a dungeon.
Mhm.
more than likely they're not going to be able to get a full rest because you have to think about it. They're in a very dangerous area, right? Full rest takes 8 hours at least. How are they going to prepare for that? What can they do? If they're in a dangerous area, who else is wandering around? Does the boss find them? Obviously, they've been going through this dangerous area, killing things and making racket, right? They probably know that they're there. If a group says we're gonna leave and then take a rest and then come back, another tool in the DM toolbox is, well, you left. The remaining enemies know you're coming and they're gonna prepare for you specifically. Maybe you got the drop on them when you first got here, but fool me once, fool me twice, shame on. What is it? Fool me once, shame on you. Fool me twice, shame on me. That,
Yeah.
that kind of mentality. No upstanding bad guy is just gonna let them waltz back in after they got embarrassed first time around. The way that I typically run it, short rests might be possible depending on the surrounding. It's a lot of depends on the situation, but it really does.
Yeah,
But
good answer.
yeah,
Tips.
that's I'm glad that wasn't a problem that I had to sort of mitigate in our game, but I have definitely seen games where it's like, I'm gonna take a long rest right now. It's in the DM, you're like, you're in the middle of a dungeon, like you're 40 feet underground in a cave. What are you gonna do here? So
What's the dimensional pocket? Dimension rope? That old trick?
I think that's only an hour, so you can get a short rest. Rope trick you thinking of?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So that's an easy hour that hopefully you're safe in.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, a short rest, um, that's something that could possibly be achieved by a group, maybe once, depending on how long this dungeon crawl is, right? Um, but there's also other tools in the tool belt. Are there time constraints to said
Mm,
dungeon? Are every encounter doesn't have to be I kill the things. There could be other objectives, and that's really a great way to make combat more interesting as well. Is your goal isn't to kill all the dudes, your goal is to save the town goers, keep them from taking MacGuffin to this area. um a dungeon crawl can be the same thing. Maybe their goal isn't like I go in and kill a bad guy vampire. Maybe it's I have to stop this thing, and if I spend time resting, that gives them more time to make thing happen. So all great ways to sort of mitigate these things.
great tips. The other question is the big bad evil guy aware of the party approaching? If so, then they can marshal their defenses or either
Hmm.
drain. Oh, it's the stuff that you talked about already, but
Hmm.
uh, resource their metering attacks or gather up in the overwhelming assault, or even order minions to waylay them while they gather their stuff and flee. Oh yeah, that's all good stuff.
Yeah, and I've had that happen to me specifically in a game I was playing in with Jesse as the DM, where things were getting a little too hot in the dungeon, and we left and took a rest and came back, and they were ready for us, which makes total sense because they were intelligent creatures that were trying to protect their bad guy temple. So yeah,
Yeah, well,
environmental hazards, great Borticus, ticking clock, or the video game concept of a death wall, something coming for them, right? And that goes back to not all dungeon crawls are I go in and kill bad guy. Like you could have things happening, um, time clocks, being hunted, all sorts of fun stuff.
thanks for the 30 more 4 months, Borticus. A lot of months.
Yeah,
Like a goristro? What's a goristro?
that's what the group encountered in City of Terror. That was after them. That made them run into the sewers.
I don't know why I had an accent when I said that either.
Go Goristro.
Goristo.
It adds a little more pizzazz to that
That
terrifying enemy. Doesn't need more of it, but it has it now.
that sounds like fine dining to me.
I'd like to go to the Goristro this afternoon.
Like a barista, but angry. Yeah,
It's an angry
exactly.
bistro where they yell at you. An Italian restaurant where they throw rolls at you and yell the menu at you. Perfect. I don't know if I'd eat there. It too sounds too stressful for me.
Oh, you don't wanna be badgered into your meal?
I no, I don't no, I don't. Yeah, another great example. Borderkits had a dungeon that had a blood mist that did a small amount of damage once per hour. That's not enough to really be a threat on its own, but it's just prevented resting. Yeah, so 1d6 per hour isn't a big deal, but if they want to take a whole 8-hour nap, that's going to add up for sure, for every
I
player.
don't feel
So
like yeah, I don't feel like you can rest at all if you're taking damage every hour.
yeah. I don't know if I was there for that one, Board. I don't. It doesn't ring any bells, but I tend to have a poor memory in general too. So but yeah, all great ways to sort of mitigate these things. Uh, and I will say too, you're not alone. You don't try and make everything up and reinvent every single wheel as a new DM or even as a current DM. You don't have to do it. There's so many resources out there that you can use. Like when I started in particular, I grabbed the Lazy Dungeon Master. There's also a new one called Return to Lazy Dungeon Master, by Michael Shea, otherwise known as Sly Flourish, that talks a lot about time management and focusing on what you need to focus on, and not every single building in town, in every town, and every NPC and shop. Lots of resources out there. There's plenty of YouTube videos, including this one. You can use this one to help you out. So a lot of great information is out there. You're not alone. Ask somebody too. I would assume that if you're a new DM, that you've been a player, right? So ask your old GMs, hey, how do you prep? How do you do these things? Share that sort of wealth of knowledge with everybody. As I know that anyone asking me, I'm happy to share that information. I'm just happy to see more DMs in the world, and I know that the DMs before me are the same way.
Boom, new segment. Ask a DM. It's gonna be new short materials for casters and cantrips. Gonna write that down to remember.
Yeah, go for it. I'll write it down too. I'll do ask a DM, and then I won't know what it means, and I'll ask you about it. Yeah, the world could always use more DMs. And I think one thing too that you brought up a while ago, Chinner, that I saw it scroll in the chat is things like GPT, right? That I have used some of that too for because what I use it for is I'm bad at coming up with things out of thin air, like with starting from scratch. It's a great way, I think, an interesting tool to use to kind of get the creative juices flowing. I'm not saying putting in prompts and then copy pasting what it is and then building your campaign out of it. Don't do that because it's not gonna be great. But it's a great way to kind of get the conversation starting for sure. Interesting tool that's kind of emerged very recently. It's very knowledgeable.
Yeah, I think we used to have dice that would roll and would have topics, and then you can
Yeah.
like generate a storyline or a quest line based on those topics that would kind of randomly roll out, and then you just kind of mold it into something that you can use.
Yeah, and there's ton of like generators out there for towns, for like quest hooks, for like environmental hazards, all sorts of stuff out there. Question from Bordicus. Do either of you have a favorite trap slash puzzle you either ran or encountered? A favorite trap or puzzle? Puzzles are tough for me because as a player, I hate puzzles. And that's just max here. I don't like puzzles. But I understand that other players like puzzles and I'm happy for them to do them. Which makes it really hard for me as a DM to incorporate them. I've done some in the campaign. Favorite traps. What about you? Do you have any favorites that come to your mind? Either the ones that you have created or encountered?
I don't think any that I've created. Um, I feel like with traps or puzzles, uh, like as a player, I don't want to waste too much time trying to figure out a puzzle. Um, and then yeah, like puzzles aren't that fun to me as a player. It's just kind of, I mean, it's fun to flex your brain muscles, but when you're trying to figure out a puzzle with multiple people, it's kind of like too many cooks. It kind of bogs things down. But for favorite trap that I've encountered, uh, I don't know if it was a favorite, but it was most memorable. It was like a negative energy trap,
Hmm.
and my character stepped on it and lost too many levels and just died. It's just like, well, the
Jesus.
way the DM described how I died to the party, it kind of traumatized everyone. Just like the soul being sucked out of my character. It was I thought it was pretty awesome.
Wow. I would advise I man, that's rough. Like a trap straight up killing a player character. That's rough.
I mean, I was
How
I was resurrected later and took the
yeah.
level hit, but yeah, I mean, I thought it was awesome because I was like, yeah, I just died. I don't know, what about chat? If
I
chat can find a solution, or not a solution, but something they'd enjoyed.
I think one of my favorite puzzles slash traps that I did was very, very early on. And it was sort of like a traversal puzzle when you were all in the ruins um of I don't remember the name of the old dwarven fort. Farcrest. Ruins of Farcrest. Um, it was just a very simple like map with like traversal and a couple of traps on it, and it was one of those things where when and there's nothing like groundbreaking or earth shattering. It was just one of the first ones that I'd done, and I did not know how the party would solve it. I'd say, okay, I'm gonna put them in this situation and see what they do. And I don't know, I like that because that was the kind of first situation that I put you all in, and you solved it. It went great. There's a couple mishaps in it, but I remember you looking at the map and said, "Hey, there's this giant like branch trunk here. Can we use that to get across?" Yeah, awesome. Go for it. Do that. I don't know. It just sticks in my memory as like one of the first times that you all encountered that.
You did it.
I will
You're
say
smart.
it is for puzzles, and I'm not kidding at all. And I'll explain myself after this. If you're looking for puzzles for your D&D party, I kid you not, look at like some third to fifth grade level like puzzles. If you're looking for like word puzzles or things like that, riddles, those sort of things, grab some materials from a teacher online for like third to fifth grade level, and it's not meant to be insulting. And the reason why I go for that area is because a puzzle is much different when you are playing D&D because you are not your character and you can't see what they see, you can't hear what they hear, you can't smell what they smell, right? There's a level of abstraction away from the character to the player that I think makes puzzles for me much harder conceptually. Um, but if you have some of those things, flavor them for D&D and whatnot, I think it's a lot more fulfilling because it's something that players can usually solve even through that sort of nebulous abstraction layer. I've had some success with it. I know other people have too.
Yeah, I don't think also with puzzles, you don't want your players to feel stupid that they can't figure out this puzzle,
Right.
and then they're gonna just end up being frustrated and not knowing what to do.
Exactly.
Um, yeah, that's not a good position to be in. So
No.
yeah, don't make your players feel stupid and
Yeah.
like do overly complicated puzzles.
Mhm. I think you all got the puzzle very quickly in that same dungeon right before you met Mimi with the anvil. I remember thinking that you all got that like immediately with the metal materials on the anvil and the doors.
Yeah, I think yeah, and that you also did a great job describing the scene
Hmm.
and what's happening, so it made it easier for us to figure out the puzzle. So yeah, if players are having problems with puzzles, just go in more detail.
Yeah.
Help your players out.
I going back to traps, and she would say the best traps are fatal ones, especially for groups that don't think to look. I I would be hesitant of putting in something that's like, if you don't see this, you're dead. Because that might not feel good to the players. Um, if there's some sort of indication beforehand that this is a very dangerous place, uh, that could potentially be lethal, that's a different story. And maybe this wasn't your intention, but a surprise death trap, I don't like that, because I know if I was a player and there was like, that feels a lot like rocks fall and you die type thing, that old meme. I don't like that because it takes a lot of agency from the player. Of I don't know. That's just not my style. Yeah, might not feel good about a deadly trap. Might not feel good if they didn't know it was coming and had no reason to believe it would be there. I'll put that out there. Um, but yeah, if it doesn't feel good to the player, the character, they won't, probably won't feel anything because they'll be dead. But you know,
Yeah, I mean, we talked about this before. Like players get attached to their characters, so
mhm.
obviously, if their character dies, they're gonna feel bummed and possibly demoralized.
Yeah, D&D is very different now than what it was. There was a lot of emphasis now on your character and being invested in the story and these things, whereas previously, characters dead, we'll roll a new one next week, you know. But I agree with you, Chiba. It's not something you would do with a new group, but with like an experienced group of players. Yeah, maybe I'll throw in a death trap in campaign 2 and see if they get it.
If I step on that trap, just make sure you describe it beautifully to the party as
Of
I die
course.
and wither.
Yeah, I will say, Chinner, and that's a good point. Of your DM has been trying to balance your campaign, and as you're all level 14. Y'all stopped at level 13, if I'm not mistaken, right? In campaign
Correct.
one.
Yes.
Once you're getting to 13 and 14, you're starting to creep into some of the in-game stuff where the stakes have to be really high. Um, because you're sort of getting into that last tier of play, and it's tough. Because I don't think that it's very balanced, but D&D's not balanced when you get to that last tier of play. Especially when you can use crazy shit like wish to make whatever you want happen. That's where you get to crazy town in D&D.
Yeah, I've never DM'd anything higher than I want to say 7. But yeah,
Mhm.
all that stuff to me is uncharted territory. I have no idea how to balance a campaign out with a group of murder hobos, basically.
Yeah, and I think once you reach those levels, that's where you're creeping up to the level where it's like, okay, you've got to start fighting like major monsters or deities at this point, which is totally fine. Like if you want that sort of heroic campaign, good on you. You just got to start throwing some crazy shit at them, and it has to make sense with the campaign too. And I will say one of the easiest ways to ratchet up the difficulty in combat is more enemies. The more enemies there are, that means the more turns enemies have, which means the harder it is. Going 4 versus 1 for one big bad enemy might be hard, but if they're going up against 6 to 7 to 8, that's a whole lot of action economy that the players have to deal with too.
Yeah, I think you pulled that off too when we were fighting the Archmage in campaign 1. And well,
Hmm.
not him specifically, he was just watching from above when we were doing the ritual.
Hmm.
Is having those 2 mages zooming around causing trouble, and that was super difficult. That was a huge challenge.
Yeah, yeah, and that's something that you all hadn't. You've had a little taste of that, but nothing like full on. Um, yeah, Castro's gonna be hard for sure. Totally different type of enemy. Um, yeah. Throw a pack of Tarrasques at him. Yeah, just get a handful of Tarrasques and just toss them out there. It'd be fine.
A handful, just one. Jesus.
Yeah. And that's a good point too, Board, is that too many enemies can be a gameplay problem. It can slog through combat. Yeah, there's a point where the danger isn't worth the boredom of watching the DM play by themselves for an hour. Yeah. Yeah. And that's what we talked about, speeding up combat, things that you can do. And there's a very nice balance. I would not recommend having like, okay, you're fighting these 15 enemies all at once. Probably not a great idea unless their minions, which is a very fun thing that fourth edition had that I think is
Mhm.
fantastic.
Oh, yeah.
And the quick TLDR on minions is it's basically a monster with all the normal stats, except they have 1 HP. So once they get bopped, then they're done.
Yeah, I think we have to be cognizant as well because we're also live streaming D&D, and we don't wanna be bogged down by having, like, an
Yes.
hour, hour and a half long combat of just, uh, mewling after opponent. But I think you do a great job of not making the combats overly too long, but also keeping it interesting and, like, keeping
Hmm.
our attention.
Yeah, and I will say DMing for a live stream is very different than DMing for just your friends. You know, you can talk to your friends about what kind of game you want to play, what you want combat to be like, those sort of things. Um, and I'll say too, of going back to like, if you throw a bunch of enemies at them, don't make the success of combat to be to kill every single enemy. Make it something else. Make them have to do something, have to get something, have to stop something from happening. It's a great way to mitigate some of that stuff.
Yeah, or even you have to escape the building, you don't have to kill everything, you just the terms of victory is getting away.
Yep. Hmm. Absolutely. Other things that you can pull out of your DM toolbox are, certain enemies when they get to a certain threshold of their HP, they run. There are plenty of intelligent enough creatures or instinctual enough creatures that will know I don't want to die for over this, and they'll just leave.
Mhm.
I think very rarely for humanoids to fight to the death unless they're sort of zealots, for that fact, as well as like a lot of beasts. Um, their motivation for attacking a party is probably like I'm hungry or you're in my lair. But if it gets too hot to handle, they're probably not going to want to risk their life over it. So lots of little ways to tweak how difficulty and combat and pacing and stuff works.
Oh, yeah, that's a huge tip. What is the opponent's or enemies or units' motivation, right? So
Hmm.
that can help give DMs, a lot of ideas on how the combat would go.
Yeah, run your monsters intelligently. And don't just make them a sack of HP for them to go down to zero. Because this gets boring real quick for the DM and for the players.
Well, great. I don't see any other questions coming through. I think, yeah, that was very educational. And yeah, thanks for doing all the heavy lifting, Max.
I'm opinionated. It's fine. That's it's fine. But no, you all had some great questions and some great tips of your own, for sure. But with that being said, I think we'll conclude tonight's episode of Tome of Knowledge. But be sure to tune in on Friday where we have Ron's Dreamy One Shot. It's going to be amazing. We also do Tome of Knowledge every single Monday. And I think next week we had talked about we'll be talking about the D&D Summit or the what is it
Yeah,
called?
the
The
D&D Direct, I think it's
Yeah,
what it's called.
thank you.
So we'll,
D&D Direct is happening tomorrow, so we're going to take some notes and see what's happening there and discuss it.
yeah,
And I
we'll
think the
talk about it
following
next Monday.
Yeah, and the following week, I think we're gonna go watch the D&D movie and talk about it. So we'll have
Yeah.
some potentially hot takes coming from that, which will be
Everyone
interesting.
has 2 weeks to watch the D&D movie, and then because it's gonna be full on spoilers, so
Yeah,
and if you don't
yeah.
want spoilers, then, uh, just watch the movie anyways. It's probably gonna be a good ride.
I hope so. I have high hopes, and I hope that I'm not sad, but we'll see.
I
But
think if you set the bar low, you'll never get disappointed.
what a great outlook to have. what a great outlook to have. And with
Yeah.
that being said, I hope you all have a fantastic night, and we will see you all next time.
Bye,
Bye,
everybody.
everybody.